All right, ready to dive into something really fascinating. We're going to explore how learning English is seen in the Muslim world, religiously speaking. We've got excerpts here from different fatwas about this very thing.
It's interesting, right? It's not just about grammar rules or anything like that. It's about how language connects with beliefs, about culture, about identity, about what it means to be Muslim in today's world.
So less, can I learn this tense? And more, will this language change me?
Exactly. And these fatwas, they give us a look into how Islamic scholars, how they've dealt with English becoming so widespread, especially its impact on Arabic, since, that's the language of the Quran.
Before we get into the details, can you give us the overview? What are the main perspectives on learning English that we see in these fatwas?
Basically, there are two camps. One says it's okay to learn English, sometimes even necessary. The other is more cautious, seeing it as potentially problematic. But, and this is where it gets interesting, that even those who are okay with it often have conditions, caveats.
The idea of necessity comes up a lot, right? Can we dig into that? When would learning English be a necessity, according to these fatwas?
Well, you see phrases like, it's permissible if absolutely necessary, or one is allowed if it's a necessity, coming up again and again.
So what counts as necessary? Ordering food on vacation probably isn't enough.
Yeah, you got it. It's deeper than that. One big one is dawah, sharing the faith. If someone only speaks English, learning it becomes a way to fulfill that duty, to connect.
So English becomes a tool for religious obligation. Interesting. What other necessities are there?
Access to knowledge. Some scholars argue that if important information science technology is only in English, then learning it becomes a duty for the community. It's about keeping up with the world, contributing.
So it's about empowering the Muslim community in a world where English is so dominant.
Exactly. Navigating a global society, but with religious principles in mind. But even when they say it's okay to learn English, there's this caution, even anxiety, about its influence.
What kind of influence are they worried about? Tell me more.
One big one is this idea of English as a Trojan horse. The worry is that if you let English in, it brings all this Western culture with it, and that might lead people away from their faith.
Like, learn the language, but don't let it change who you are, what you believe.
Right. It's about boundaries, engaging with the language, but not losing your identity.
Makes you think about how connected language and identity really are, especially for cultures with such a strong sense of history and tradition.
Exactly. That link is super important to understanding these fatwas. One even says, a Muslim should not speak a language other than Arabic, because the Arabic language is the symbol of Islam and its people.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It really shows how important Arabic is, more than just communication. It's woven into their faith, their heritage.
Absolutely. For many Muslims, Arabic is the language of revelation, of their holy book. Speaking it connects them to their faith and history in a very deep way.
So, switching to English, even if it's practical, might feel like moving away from those roots.
Right. It raises questions about preserving culture. There's this worry that accepting a global language like English could mean losing their own language, which is seen as something sacred to protect and pass down.
Sounds like they see language as almost sacred, something to fight for, especially with globalization. Makes me think of how other cultures fight to keep their languages alive too, seeing them as part of who they are.
It's something that goes beyond just this one discussion. That ideal language as part of identity is something a lot of people can relate to.
It also makes you wonder about the consequences of learning English, especially if Arabic takes a back seat. What do these fatwas say about what might happen if people embrace English too much?
That's where you start to see the specific worries about how learning English might affect individuals and then the whole Muslim community. One big concern is this idea of imitating non-Muslims. They worry that by using the language of another culture, especially one like English, people might start acting like them, their mannerisms, their views, even their values.
So it's not just about the words, it's about how language can change how we see things and how we act.
Yeah, exactly. One fatwa even warns against copying the way English speakers talk, their accent and gestures. They see it as getting too close to that culture, blurring the lines.
It's like this fear that cultures will blend together and identities won't be as distinct anymore. We see that fear a lot in history, don't we? That if you let in outside influences, it changes what makes a culture unique.
All the time. Think about empires expanding, trade routes, connecting different places, even just communities coming into contact. That tension between keeping your own identity and being influenced by others, it's always there.
And language becomes a symbol of that,
Yep.
right? A real representation of those bigger cultural forces.
Right. And it goes deeper than just how people act. Some fatwas say that if you speak English when you don't need to, it's almost like being hypocritical.
Hypocritical. Whoa, that's strong. How do they connect those?
Well, they say if you know Arabic, the language of the Quran, why would you choose English unless you're trying to seem more westernized? Like you're trying to fit in with those outside the faith. It's like they're questioning your motives.
So it's about being genuine,
Yeah.
making sure that what you do on the outside matches what you believe on the inside.
Yeah, and it speaks to how tough it is to navigate a world where all these cultures and languages are mixing. How do you engage with people different from you but stay true to your own values and traditions? It's a question a lot of people struggle with.
Finding that balance between being open to the world and holding on to who you are.
Exactly. And in a way, these fatwas are trying to help people with that, to figure out how to deal with English without compromising their commitment to Islam.
It really makes you think. These fatwas, they're grappling with something as simple as language, but it turns into these really deep questions about identity, faith, how we live in a world that's so interconnected.
It is. And we have to remember these are just a few viewpoints within a much bigger conversation happening in Islam.
Right. It's not like there's one Muslim opinion on English or any other language.
Not at all. Every faith, every culture has lots of different opinions and interpretations. These fatwas give us a peek into some of the concerns and things they're thinking about, but they don't show every single belief out there.
Okay, so for someone listening who might be feeling a little lost with all these different views, what's the most important takeaway from these fatwas about learning English?
I think the key is realizing that learning a language, especially one as influential as English, is not a neutral thing. It comes with cultural baggage assumptions, values, all built in.
So there's more to it than just learning words and grammar. It's about understanding what it means to bring this other language into your life, especially since it holds so much power in the world.
Absolutely. And it means you have to be intentional, aware. Why are you learning this language? How are you going to handle the cultural influences that come with it? How are you going to make sure it fits with your own values and beliefs? These are all important questions.
It's about taking charge of your own language learning, being mindful of how it might affect you, and how you see your own culture and identity.
Right. It's about realizing that language is powerful. It can change how we see the world and how we live in it.
So far, we've mostly talked about the concerns these fatwas raise, but I'm curious, do any of them see any positives, any opportunities that English might offer? It does seem like we've been focusing on the worries some of these fatwas have about learning English.
Yeah.
Do any of them look at the good things about it, the possibilities?
Yeah, we've definitely been digging into the concerns, but this is where it gets interesting, you know? Some fatwas see English as risky, but others actually say it can make Islam stronger, not weaker.
Okay, now that's a twist. How do they explain that?
It goes back to dawah, spreading the message of Islam. They say, in a world where everyone speaks English, Muslims need to be able to explain their faith in English too.
So less about fitting into those cultures, more about meeting people where they are, having real conversation.
Exactly. Breaking down walls,
Yeah.
challenging stereotypes, building understanding. That's how English becomes a way to spread the message, to connect with everyone, not a threat to Islam.
That's so different from the whole English is a Trojan horse idea we talked about. It really shows how language can do both, bring people together or keep them apart depending on how you use it.
It is, and it shows how complicated this all is, right? These fatwas are dealing with globalization head-on, figuring out how to be part of the world but stay true to what they believe. And the language is a big part of that.
So it's not about English being good or bad, it's about why you learn it, what you're using it for.
I think you've got it. Even something like learning a language becomes a moral, even a spiritual question. You learning English to fit in, to get ahead, to watch more TV? Or are you learning it to connect with people, share knowledge, do something good in the world?
It's about being aware, making choices about how we use language.
Yeah,
Understanding that those choices, they have an impact on us and the people around us.
absolutely. It means we have to approach learning languages and really any time cultures meet with a sense of responsibility. It's not just about skills, it's about who we become and how we live our lives.
So for our listeners, after going on this deep dive with us, what's the big question they should be asking themselves as they learn languages themselves?
The question I'd ask is, can I learn a global language like English in a way that respects my own culture and religion, but also lets me connect with everyone else in a real way?
That's a great question and not an easy one to answer. It's about finding that middle ground
Hmm.
where you can learn from other cultures but stay true to your own values.
Exactly. And I think that's a journey worth going on.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. It's amazing what these fatwas tell us about the worries, the hopes, all the complicated feelings around something as basic as language. Thanks for walking us through it.
Glad to do it.